Picture this: a farmer's field in Virginia, golden wheat swaying in the summer breeze. Within hours, this peaceful farmland would be baptized in blood, forging legends from ordinary men. August 28, 1862. The name Brawner's farm meant nothing to history yet. But by sunset, it would echo through time as the birthplace of America's most feared infantry unit. They called themselves the Iron Brigade, though that name hadn't been earned yet. Wisconsin and Indiana farm boys who'd never seen real war marching toward their first taste of hell. John Gibbon watched his men through field glasses. These weren't hardened veterans. They were clerks, farmers, blacksmiths. Could wheat farmers become warriors? The next few hours would provide that brutal answer. Imagine standing in that field hearing nothing but crickets and distant wagon wheels. You don't know that in minutes, this silence will shatter into the screams of dying boys. Stonewall Jackson's Confederate veterans lay hidden in the woods, watching Union columns march past like lambs to slaughter. These rebels had already tasted victory at Bull Run, Kernstown, Winchester. Private Sullivan Ballou from Wisconsin clutched his rifle, sweat dripping despite the evening cool. His last letter home sat unfinished in his pocket. Some letters are never meant to be completed. The Iron Brigade wore distinctive black hats, hardy hats that made them targets. Other Union units mocked them as show soldiers. Tonight would prove whether fancy hats made brave hearts. You see, courage isn't born in training camps or parade grounds. True courage emerges only when ordinary men face extraordinary terror and choose to stand rather than run. Colonel Bragg's artillery pieces sat silent, crews waiting. Each cannonball would soon tear through human flesh like paper. Artillery doesn't distinguish between heroes and cowards. Death comes equally to all. A mockingbird sang from an oak tree, oblivious to the storm gathering beneath its branches. Nature continues its ancient rhythms while men prepare to destroy each other with methodical precision. General King's division moved down the Warrenton Turnpike, dust clouds marking their passage. They believed they were marching toward safety. Instead, they were walking directly into Jackson's trap. Think about this moment. Thousands of young men, north and south, breathing the same air, sharing the same sunset. In minutes, they would be trying to kill each other. Captain Richardson checked his pocket watch, 6:15 in the evening. Time moves differently before battle. Minutes stretch like hours, while hours collapse into heartbeats. Time becomes your enemy. The stage was set. Two forces, each believing God favored their cause, about to collide with the fury of a thunderstorm. Only one truth would emerge from the approaching chaos. The first shot cracked like lightning across the field. A Wisconsin farm boy named Thomas Murphy fell instantly, his blood watering Virginia soil he'd never wanted to see. Suddenly, the entire Confederate line erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the tree line like deadly fireflies. The Iron Brigade's baptism of fire had begun with the fury of a biblical flood. General Gibbon shouted orders that were swallowed by gunfire. His untested regiments faced a choice: break and run like so many Union units before them, or stand and fight. Private Heinrich Schmidt, barely 18, had emigrated from Germany to avoid war. Now he found himself loading and firing with mechanical precision, survival instincts overriding conscious thought completely. The Confederates advanced through the smoke like ghosts. These were Jackson's veterans, men who'd marched 600 miles, won impossible victories, and learned to kill without hesitation or mercy. But something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking, the Wisconsin and Indiana boys held their ground. Farm-strong hands gripped rifles steady. Quiet determination replaced initial terror and overwhelming confusion. Colonel Meredith rode behind his line, shouting encouragement. A bullet tore through his hat brim. Death missed him by inches, but his voice never wavered. Leadership means facing bullets. You must understand, these men had never experienced combat's true horror. Yet they stood in perfect lines, reloading under fire, as if they'd been born for this moment. Sergeant O'Sullivan watched his brother Patrick crumple, gut-shot and screaming. The urge to help warred against duty. In battle, love becomes another form of unbearable torture and crushing anguish. The Confederate charge struck like a hammer blow. Bayonets clashed with bayonets. Men fought with fists, rocks, anything available. Civilization stripped away, revealing the savage beast lurking within all humanity. Captain Williams saw his color-bearer fall. The regimental flag, their sacred honor, lay in the dirt. He dove forward, grabbed the staff, and raised it high despite murderous crossfire surrounding him. Through the smoke and screams, something remarkable emerged. These farm boys weren't running. They were adapting, learning, becoming something harder than the iron they would soon be named after. The Confederates couldn't believe it. Where were the usual Union retreats? These black-hatted Yankees fought like demons, giving ground only when corpses made advancing literally impossible for them. Private Morrison reloaded his rifle for the 20th time. His hands moved automatically now. Terror had transformed into cold, calculated fury. He was no longer a farmer. He was becoming death. A philosophical truth emerged from the carnage. Ordinary men possess extraordinary courage when fighting for something greater than themselves. These men fought for each other, not distant political abstractions. The sun began setting, painting the battlefield crimson. How fitting that nature provided appropriate colors for humanity's greatest folly. Blood and sunset merged into one terrible, beautiful tableau of destruction. Lieutenant Foster, barely 21, led a bayonet charge into Confederate ranks. His mother's last letter urged him to stay safe. Some promises cannot be kept when honor demands sacrifice. Jackson's veterans began to respect their opponents. These weren't the usual Union troops who broke at first contact. These black-hatted devils fought with stubborn Western grit and determination. The wounded crawled toward safety, leaving bloody trails in the trampled wheat. Some would make it. Others would water Virginia soil with their life's blood, far from home. Colonel Bragg's artillery found its range. Cannonballs plowed through Union ranks like bowling balls through pins. Yet the line held. Dead men were quickly replaced by living ones. Consider this. In 2 hours, farm boys from Wisconsin learned lessons that would serve them through 4 years of war. Pain teaches faster than any drill instructor ever could. Sergeant Kelly, an Irish immigrant, fought with the fury of ancient Celtic warriors. America had given him a new life. Now he would give America his blood in grateful return. The Confederates launched another assault. Rebel yells pierced the evening air like banshee screams. But the Black Hats stood firm, their own battle cries answering the Southern challenge with defiance. You see the transformation happening before your eyes. Boys becoming men, men becoming soldiers, soldiers becoming legends. The Iron Brigade was being forged in fire, shaped by enemy bullets. Private Johnson's rifle jammed. A Confederate soldier rushed forward with leveled bayonet. Johnson drew his knife. They grappled in the dirt, fighting for their lives with primitive desperation and fury. The ammunition began running low. Each shot had to count now. These weren't target practice rounds. Each bullet carried a man's life in its trajectory toward enemy lines. Captain Anderson watched his company dwindle from 80 men to 40, then 20. Yet those remaining 20 fought harder than the original 80. Adversity breeds an iron determination in survivors. A strange thing happened as darkness fell. The firing slowed but didn't stop. Both sides were exhausted, but neither would retreat. Pride had replaced strategy as the driving force. The wounded called for their mothers. Union and Confederate voices mingled in the darkness, speaking the same language of pain. War reveals humanity's fundamental unity through shared suffering and mortality. General King realized his green troops had accomplished the impossible. They'd stood toe-to-toe with Stonewall Jackson's veterans and refused to break. A new legend was being born tonight. The final Confederate assault came just before full darkness. Desperate men charged across corpse-strewn ground. But the Black Hats held their line, firing into the approaching shadows with deadly precision. Private Murphy, wounded but still fighting, looked around at his surviving comrades. These weren't the same men who'd marched down the turnpike hours earlier. They were something harder now. Jackson's men finally pulled back into the woods. They'd met their match in these Western farm boys. The Iron Brigade had earned their name in blood, sweat, and stubborn courage. The battlefield fell quiet except for the moans of wounded men. Stars appeared overhead, indifferent to human suffering. Nature continued its eternal cycle while men counted their terrible losses below. Colonel Meredith surveyed his decimated ranks. Half his men lay dead or wounded. Yet those still standing had proven something precious. Courage isn't born, it's forged in the crucible of combat. Dawn broke over Brawner's farm, revealing the price of glory. Bodies lay scattered like broken dolls across the golden wheat field. The harvest would be blood and bones this year. The survivors looked different in morning light. Their eyes held a hardness that hadn't been there yesterday. They'd crossed a line that separated boys from battle-hardened veterans forever. News of their stand spread through the Union Army like wildfire. The Western boys had done what Eastern regiments often failed to accomplish. They'd faced Jackson and held ground. General McClellan would later write that Brawner's farm proved Western soldiers possessed a fighting spirit equal to any troops in the world. High praise from a usually cautious commander. But think about the cost. Families in Wisconsin and Indiana would receive telegrams that would shatter their worlds. Glory always demands payment in tears and broken hearts back home. The Iron Brigade would go on to fight at Antietam, Gettysburg, and the Wilderness. But their legend began here, in this forgotten field, on this August evening in 1862. Private Schmidt, one of the survivors, would write to his sister, "We are no longer the boys who left home. We are soldiers now, forged in fire and fury." The Confederates also learned respect for their opponents that night. These weren't the usual Union troops who broke easily. These black-hatted devils would haunt Southern dreams for years ahead. Years later, veterans from both sides would meet at reunions. Former enemies would shake hands across the same ground where they'd once tried to kill each other with hatred. The farmhouse still stands today, bullet holes filled and painted over. Tourists visit, reading bronze plaques that reduce human drama to cold dates and casualty figures and statistics. But if you stand quietly in that field at sunset, you might hear echoes. The ghost of gunfire. The whisper of dying boys calling for their mothers. History lives in landscapes. The Iron Brigade story reminds us that heroes aren't born, they're made. Made by circumstance, necessity, and the choice to stand when running would be easier and infinitely safer. We remember Brawner's farm not for the tactics or strategy, but for the human drama. Ordinary men facing extraordinary circumstances and choosing courage over comfort, duty over safety. The true victory wasn't military, it was spiritual. Boys became men, men became legends, and legends became immortal. The Iron Brigade earned their name through blood, sweat, and unwavering determination. So the next time you face your own battlefield, whether it's fear, failure, or despair, remember, Brawner's farm. Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it.